Hi everyone, my name's Thomas Halford. I'm a 43-year-old father of three. I just became a grandfather. I've been married for 20 years. I've tried to make this video several times, and there's always either it's just not really came across in the right way, I guess. So, but to set it up, it's going to be to discuss something called a twin flame, and my twin flame, how I discovered that I had one, and the journey that it took me on as a result. It's a very difficult one for me to talk about simply because I discovered my twin flame after she had passed, and maybe that's why I've struggled so much making these videos or trying to. So if I do get emotional at times, that's why it's been such an impactful journey, such a life-changing one, and it's very, very difficult. It was very difficult for me to wrap my head around, and even more difficult to talk about, I guess. Not difficult, but difficult to explain, to say the least. You know, before I started on this, I had never even heard the word twin flame. I didn't know it existed. I um, I was not part of the world that knows that twin flames exist, if that makes sense. So I apologize to that community. I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, you're probably from that community. So if I say something wrong, or a term wrong, or a word wrong, then I apologize. It's not meant to offend you. It's just from lack of knowing. Doesn't mean that I'm not doing everything I can to learn, but you know, it's a very confusing thing, especially for someone like me. I'm a disabled vet. I was a bomb technician for a long, long time. Engineer by trade, very practical guy. Was not very open to uh, not open at all to anything like this before this started. I'm not quite sure where to start because, like I said, I discovered her more than a year after she had passed in Taiwan. I live in California with my family, so I'm just going to start from the beginning, and hopefully by the end of this, I'll have something here I can use. So my twin and I were actually born in the same hospital, actually, about 15 days apart, in Dothan, Alabama. This is where we grew up as kids. The first time we met was in 7th grade. I was 12 years old, and we had an instant connection as friends. And my relationship with her name was Christine. I called her Chrissy, and she called me Thomas. But my relationship with her was never a romantic one. It was probably the most unique friendship I had as a child, and it's definitely turned out to be the most unique one I'm having as an adult. So, um, yeah. So we met in 7th grade. I I had an experience when I was 12 years old. Um, some might call it a near-death experience. Uh, it was more of a spiritual one for me. I came to school uh, not knowing it wasn't something you should talk about openly. The family I grew up in, my family has a lot of Native American. My grandmother was Native American, so talking about spirituality and things like that was very open. I have an autistic mother and a brother, and communicating with them was very differently than most people. So communicating with feelings and things like that was very normal. So when I came to school and started talking about that experience, you can imagine the reaction I got from most of my uh, students and friends and teachers and things like that. Someone reported to the guidance counselor, and I was called in and ended up having to go see a psychiatrist and all these different things and diagnose ADHD, and then very quickly never speak about it again. But the one person when that happened that understood in some way, some weird way, was Chrissy. And that's how we became connected and became very, very good friends at 12, 13 years old. At about 13, our lives took, different paths. We were from two different worlds. She was originally from Taiwan, and clearly I'm not. She had a very conservative, her family was pretty conservative and restrictive, and so there was no, even though we were very drawn to each other, dating or anything like that, we were too young or wouldn't have been allowed. So we did get to hang out once or twice, and So anyway, like I said, about 13, our lives went two completely different paths. And that was the last I saw or heard of her until about 2015. 2015, I finally got on Facebook, and the first person to reach out to me on Facebook was Chrissy. And we connected over the fact that she had, since that, as an adult, had gotten married in her mid-30s and had actually settled down in the same. Like I said earlier, I was in the military, and I was stationed in Georgia at one point in my career, early in my career, and in a place right outside of Atlanta, Georgia, called Lawrenceville. And it just happened to be where her and her husband were living when we reconnected. At the time we reconnected, within about 6 months, she was moving. Her and her husband were literally sold everything they had, and were moving to Taiwan to be closer to her family so that she could teach English. We stayed in contact for about a year, very, very intensely, and we talked a lot during that year. By this point, my life had took a very traditional path. I went to college, military. I was an engineer in that same town for a company. After I got out of the military, the first town I lived in was this town, Lawrenceville. I became an engineer at this company called Scientific Atlanta, which is the biggest thing there in town. And she had taken a very different path. She had become very spiritual and open, and she was she was into something, or she was into Reiki, and she didn't have any children or anything like that. After in high school, just to back up a little bit, Chrissy developed a really unique reputation that most people didn't quite get, because she was very open about her abilities, what she could do, what she saw. She was very intuitive, very psychic. She was extremely drawn or close to birds. Birds were her thing. And ironically, they were mine too. We were both, that was another thing that we bonded over, was birds. As a matter of fact, when we reconnected over Facebook, one of the things that we discussed frequently, because we had the same parrot at the time, which she couldn't take hers to Taiwan, so she was very upset by that. And so we connected over that. So, but anyway, not to get off track, she was known, if there was ever a bird whisperer, it was my friend Chrissy, and she had no problems letting anyone know that. So you can imagine, especially in a very conservative, kind of backwards, the South in the U.S. can be a bit set in its ways. So, and there wasn't a lot of diversity there. So her talking about stuff like that didn't go over so well. Now we were not close in high school. Two different high schools, two things. I had no idea about any of that. I would find out that later. That was her experience. Like I said, in middle school, this was before she had discovered exactly what it was. When she was there for me, for what I went through, we just discussed that she had had similar experiences at that point, She had seen similar things, heard similar things, but we were still so young that she hadn't quite figured it out yet. In high school was when she really started to. And by the time we reunited in 2015, she had she had been on that path for a long time, so she's well into it. Now, we didn't discuss a lot of that at the time because I wasn't very open to it at all. I said I was very practical. That experience in me at 12 turned me the exact opposite way. First of all, going on ADHD medications prevented me from having any of those experiences for quite a while. So trying to really process here and not lose you because our story twists, and we lived, when I say parallel lives, is an understatement, to include living in that town. And that town was very significant too, because while I was there was a second experience that I had that you could call a near-death experience, and was in that town. It's when I was about 26 years old. And again, after even the second time, it drove me even further on the path that I was on. That incident led to things like depression, anxiety, and going on those medications on top of the ADHD medications. So, now, and by that point, she was starting to experience some of those things herself. She had been put on several medications herself because, like I said, she got a lot of flack for being so open as she was, and that led to her own problems dealing with kind of the social stigmas of it, I guess. It was very difficult for her in the way people treated her as a result. So anyway, she goes on to Taiwan, and we stayed in contact for about a year, like I said. When she was going through that process of moving and going over there, we had gotten really, really close. So I encouraged her to start a travel blog so that we could maintain contact and so on and so forth. And she did. It turned out that I was pretty much her only reader. Maybe another friend or two might have checked it out, but I read every word of it. So there was a lot of it that was written directly to me, and so that she knew that I was the one reading it. And she was very, very open to all of that stuff. She discussed a lot of it. I've since read it a million times in the last few months, and she talked about her spirituality. I think one of the first messages or posts that I reread was about universal energy and universal God, and it's the first time I'd ever even heard that concept. And when I read it in 2015, 2016, honestly, I had no idea what she was talking about. But I never judged her. I always got what she was talking about. Always believed her, even. I just wasn't comfortable talking about it myself, I guess, in my own experiences. And I thought at that point I'd kind of outgrew it. So I just accepted her for who she was, and was just glad that she felt open enough to discuss it. So I just left it at that. I didn't really take it any further. Well, about a few months after she got to Taiwan, she stopped making posts, and I just happened to save it. I didn't even know that I had, to be honest. It turns out I did. It's just one of those things. If you get through this, you realize that you discover a lot of things that are just is what it is, But that was one of them. Well, about a year after she was in Taiwan, Taiwan didn't go as well as she had hoped. She didn't fit in there any more than she had here, even less. Her family even had an extremely difficult time with some of the issues she was having. So we slowly drifted apart again. Like I said, she was married, I was married. We both thought that, or considered ourselves to be married to our soulmates. And we're very happy in our marriage. Our relationship was never about romance. or anything like that. It was so much more, even, or so different. It's just different, unlike any other relationship that I had. But it never crossed any lines. So this led to her attempting to take her own life. She jumped off a 5-story building in Taiwan and received devastating injuries. Devastating. I mean, multiple surgeries, multiple broken, just, I can't even think about it. It was bad. And the last time her and I actually spoke was after that accident and during her recovery. She survived it, and her experience afterwards is, she posted about that in other groups and online and stuff like that. So I've read all about that too. So that's difficult for me to talk about as well. But as she started to recover and was able to started to do rehab to walk again, was about the last time that we spoke, which was about a year before she passed away. So, and I still don't even know. I know about how she passed, but not exactly. I mean, I do, if you know what I mean. It was just never made public, if that makes sense. So anyway, that led to her losing her life on February 13th of 2018 is when she would lose her life in her battle and everything. And I had no idea. At that, during the last year of her life was a very difficult year of mine, and I was going through my own struggles and situation in California. And like I said, we were a world apart. I had family and my own thing to deal with. So anyway, she passed away on February 13th, though I found that out. I didn't even know the day she passed away. Her last post on Facebook was, or not her, it's the last one left up, was about a week before she passed, February 8th. And her page was simply turned to a legacy page. There was no memorial service, no anything. Her friends and anything was not even told when she passed. That she passed. It was just people found it as they found it, kind of like I did. But those dates were very, very significant because the same day she passed in California, I went through a very weird 3-day period, the 13th, 14th, and 15th. Very weird, to say the least. And on the 15th of February, my whole life changed. Just changed, like I'm talking about, like a switch went off. Like a light switch. There's no other way to describe it. And I walked away from my entire life. My job, my career. I gave up everything. I didn't even understand what, at the time, I couldn't even explain to you why or giving you a reason why. It was just on the 16th of February, but I said it was the 13th, 14th, 15th, so on the fourth day, I woke up in California with one purpose. I had struggled with, like I had said, ADHD since I was a kid. I was a disabled vet. I had been struggling with PTSD for years after multiple surgeries and all kinds of trouble myself. And I woke up on the 16th with one goal, and that was to figure myself out. I was done going to the VA. I was done listening to anyone else because I had been doing that for 15 years and hadn't got me anywhere, but made me worse, in my opinion. Or not in my opinion. I mean, I had not gotten any better. That had helped me cope and got me through those 15 years. I had survived them, but that was about it. And I was done with that. I knew that, and I didn't know why even. I just knew I was. So I left the world, really. I walked away from my job, and other than my wife and my kids, to include my family and everyone, I have a large extended family back home, a large one. I just cut off contact with the world. I mean, with the world. I didn't speak to anyone I didn't have to. I didn't leave the house if I didn't have to, unless I was going to a medical appointment or something that involved my immediate family. I didn't leave the house. I just stayed home and started going through the process of getting in touch with myself. And that was an excruciating process. You know, my childhood was not good, to say the least. And like I said earlier, I had an autistic mother, an autistic brother, and I just didn't have the best relationship with father, things like that, you know. So I had a lot of things to figure out. So that's what I did. Sorry, I'm nervous. I actually quit smoking not that long ago with these vape things. Yeah, but anyway, so a few months ago, though, I reached a point where it was time to kind of, and I must tell you, none of this felt like a decision, a conscious decision I was making at the time. It was more something I was just compelled to do. And the first thing I had to do was after getting in touch with myself and what my problems actually were, was then go back and get in touch with the people and things like my mother. I had not spoken to my mother in more than 10 years before a couple months ago. As a matter of fact, the last time I had spoken to my mother, 10 years, just leave it at that. And when I say not spoken, I mean in any way. Not a text, not a phone call, not a Facebook post, nothing. And but once I got in touch with myself, I became just as compelled to get in touch with my mom, father, brother. I had not seen my brother in more than 15 years, much less talked to him. And so that's what I did. I went and figured all of that out and repaired, or at least I got rid of all of that in some wild way, in a way that I had never been able to my entire life. My entire life, I had always wanted one thing, and that was a relationship with a mother, because having an autistic mother, I had never felt like I'd had one from his early childhood. It's actually from about the time I was 3 or 4 years old. First time I noticed she was a little different. First time I noticed that both her and my brother were a little different. But I'm trying to keep this more on us and not me. So I got in touch with all of that, and I can honestly tell you now that I do have a mother, a beautiful mother, and understanding her struggle and was what got me in touch with all of that. But it didn't stop there. Once that happened, then things really picked up. And I mean really picked up. The following day. And I was compelled to do all this online. I shared all of this basically through Facebook. I made a video and very emotional videos about my struggles, and just put them out there. It was bizarre. I was not someone to do anything like that. Here I was. This was something I was never been able to talk about to my wife, and I was putting it out to the world. Just these in-your-face, hardcore, direct to my mother, father, family, friends. I discussed that's what it took, I guess, to bring my emotions and my intelligence together as one. And that was significant. That was a blow your mind moment, because when they came together, like I said, I thought that was the whole point. And then I woke up the next morning and what was I wrong? So I still had no idea at this point that Chrissy had anything to do with it. One, I didn't even realize at this point she'd even passed away. So then I was drawn to kind of go track her down, just kind of catch up. I was feeling better, and I wanted to see how she was doing. That's how I discovered that her Facebook had been turned to a legacy page and she had passed away. Now I knew about her injuries from her fall, so I assumed at the time that's how she had lost her life. So I called my mother, because we were talking again at that point, and I asked her, "Hey, do you have anything from middle school?" For whatever reason, I didn't know why. I was like, "Did you save anything from 7th, 8th grade?" And she's like, "Actually, I did." And she sent me a yearbook and a handful of pictures. And the first picture that I take out was of a school dance in 7th grade. And in that picture, there was about 30 kids, all of us on, kind of on the stage, and it was just like a big wide shot of this Christmas dance we were all at. And about 2 or 3 people over was Chrissy, standing right there. And I decided to share that picture on Facebook and simply say, "Rest in peace." I had no idea no one else knew anything. I just thought I did. And I shared it and just said, "Rest in peace, Chrissy. And you're a dear, you're a good person." That was it. And immediately I started getting messages and comments and things like that, like, "Hey, what happened? I didn't know she passed away, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, okay, that's a bit weird, but that sucks. But that, compelled me to try to find out as much as I could. I had no relationship with her family or friends, and they were extremely private about, it had been a difficult tragedy for them, I assume, and they were not open to talking about it, especially an old classmate from 30 years ago. Well, no one's going to speak to me there. And then one night, I get a message from a very good friend of hers. It says, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that she actually passed away on February 13th, and I know how." And I was like, "Wow, okay." She's like, "Can you call me? Or can I call you?" And she did. And she called me, and she told me, what she had passed away, and then she told me how she found out how she had passed away, and that apparently a psychic that she didn't know had reached out to her and said that Chrissy had contacted her in whatever way. Like I said, I didn't understand how that was even possible or anything at the time. I still don't understand how that works, but that was I'm just telling you my story. So that floored me, of course. I was just like, it's wild. But everything her friend told me, I would find out and some. And consider no one else knew any of this stuff. It's pretty difficult to doubt what that lady knew. And I would speak to that psychic as well. She gave me a bunch of information that I would verify. So how she got it, make your own judgment. All I can tell you is that everything she told me is true. So anyway, that led me on this whole journey of discovering exactly what happened to her, and I won't go into that because it was interesting to say the least. But every time I would discover something new about her, it would lead me back to something about myself, something big, right? The synchronicities that started happening after that, at that point, were unbelievable. You hear people talk about it a lot, but they were unbelievable. I had 400 or 500 people, friends on Facebook, I think, at the time, and I wrote down everyone that commented or shared and stuff, and it worked out to be 30 people, 33, 30, and things like that was starting to become hugely significant, 11, 2, and 8, and all the numbers you hear associated. Now I know what they're associated with. At the time, I had no idea. I just thought it was just, man, this is wow. And then I discovered that things like our birthday was 15 days apart. We had been born in the same hospital. I discovered things like she had lived in the same town. And then I discovered that she had some really close friends that lost their mother a couple months before Chrissy passed away. And she had actually passed away on the same day as my grandfather. And then that would lead, because as these synchronicities would make themselves visible to me, or whatever you want to call it, I would then post about them, right? I had no idea that they were connected to her in any way. I was just blown away at how I was able, as multi-leveled as I could go with them. So I was trying to express to people, like, hey, check this out, this is wild, and without realizing a lot of things. But probably one of the biggest discoveries that it led me to was the fact that on that same day that I just talked about, that I had a connection with her best friends. She actually had 2 best friends in the world that were sisters, and they lost their mother on that day, the same day I lost my grandfather. It turned out to be the same exact day that my father, when he was 6 years old, and 6, witnessed 11 of my family members lose their lives right in front of him. It was a train accident that happened directly across from our family home that he grew up in, that he was actually helping his brothers and dad build when the accident happened. You can look that up. December 7th, 1963, Midland City, Alabama. 11 people lost their lives, to include one of my cousins. It was actually her first birthday that same day. And what's even crazier is the nurse that my cousin that survived. There was one survivor out of 12. 11 people lost their lives. There was 12 members of my family. My surviving cousin was taken to the hospital that Christine and I were born in, and the very first nurse that hospital ever hired, back when it opened in like 1957, had passed away in like 2014, and my hometown newspaper did a big, huge article